On the evening of April 1st, 2026, at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, 4 people climbed into a spacecraft they had trained for years to fly. At 6:35 p.m. Eastern Time, the engines of the SLS rocket ignited, and for the first time in more than 50 years, human beings left Earth on a path toward the moon.
Their names were Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, 3 Americans and 1 Canadian, sealed inside a spacecraft called Orion, riding a column of fire off Launch Pad 39B, the same pad that once sent Apollo astronauts toward the same destination. This time, the ship carried a name of its own, Integrity.
To understand why this moment mattered, it helps to understand the gap that came before it. The last time a human being traveled beyond low Earth orbit was December 1972, when Apollo 17's crew left the lunar surface and came home. After that, the mission stopped. Budgets shifted, priorities changed, and for 5 decades, no human traveled farther than the space station, orbiting a few hundred kilometers above our heads. Robots went to the moon, rovers went to Mars, but no person did.
NASA's Artemis program was built to close that gap carefully. Its second mission, Artemis II, was not designed to land on the moon. It was designed to prove that people could survive the journey there and back, using a spacecraft that had never carried a crew before. Every system on board, life support, navigation, communication, had flown before without astronauts. This time, it needed to work with 4 lives depending on it. The mission plan called for what engineers call a free return trajectory. The same engine burn that sent Orion toward the moon also placed it on a path that would use the moon's own gravity to swing the spacecraft back toward Earth, even if something went wrong along the way. It was a safety net built into the shape of the flight itself.
For the first days after launch, the crew settled into the rhythm of deep space. They tested Orion's systems, checked communications, and watched Earth shrink behind them. Then, just after midnight on April 6th, at 12:37 a.m. Eastern Time, Orion crossed an invisible boundary, the point where the moon's gravity became stronger than Earth's. Christina Koch described the moment simply. "We are now falling to the moon," she said, rather than rising away from Earth.
That day, April 6th, became the center of the entire mission. In the early afternoon, at around 1:56 p.m. Eastern Time, the crew passed a distance that had stood unbroken for 56 years. In April 1970, the astronauts of Apollo 13 had traveled 248,655 miles from Earth during their emergency swing around the moon, the farthest any human had ever been from home. Now, Wiseman, Glover, Koch, and Hansen passed that mark, still climbing outward.
After the flyby, Orion turned back toward Earth, riding the same trajectory logic that had carried it out. For 4 more days, the crew traveled home, their spacecraft carrying data that engineers would study for months: how the life support systems performed, how the capsule handled deep space radiation, how the crew themselves handled distance and isolation that no human had experienced in half a century.
On April 10th, 2026, at 8:07 p.m. Eastern Time, Orion returned to Earth's atmosphere and splashed down in the Pacific Ocean near San Diego, California. The mission had lasted a little more than 9 days from launch to splashdown. 4 people had left and 4 people came home.
What they proved was not simply that a rocket could fly or that a capsule could survive re-entry. They proved that human beings could once again travel the distance to the moon and back, using systems built by a generation of engineers who had never seen a crewed lunar mission in their own lifetimes. Somewhere on Earth, a young engineer working on the Artemis program had likely been born after the last Apollo mission ended. Now, they had helped send 4 people farther from home than anyone in history.
The next chapter is already being written. Artemis III is expected to test lunar landing equipment in Earth orbit. Artemis IV, targeted for the end of the decade, is designed to put human boots back on the lunar surface for the first time since 1972. But that story starts here, in 9 days in April 2026, when 4 astronauts flew around the moon they had heard about their whole lives and became, for a brief moment, the farthest travelers our species has ever known.